Hey everyone, it's Ben Hardy here, and in today's video I want to go over the new Honda Civic, and then I also want to talk about the Honda Civic Si and then the Civic Type R as well. So yeah, with all that being said, let's just get straight into the video. Let's talk about the new 2022 Honda Civic, and we'll talk about the packages that we actually have some information on. And this will just kind of pertain to like your normal commuter car Civic is how I see it. So not the Si and the Type R, but I will be talking about both of those as well in today's video. So first off, you have kind of like the entry-level engine, which is a 2-liter inline 4-cylinder, and it produces 158 horsepower. And yeah, I mean, it's pretty good. It goes through a CVT still, so like that is pretty much unchanged from the transmission perspective. And aside from that, the upgraded engine you can get is a turbocharged 1.5 liter, again, inline 4, 180 horsepower. So yeah, solid as well. I mean, it's pretty similar to what you can get now. That being said though, it seems like the biggest changes have actually been with the car itself and not with the powertrain, which is pretty typical for most of the Japanese brands. Now let's talk about the styling here, interior and exterior wise, with the Civic. So it looks like it's just grown up at this point. It kind of looks like a baby Honda Accord. It looks like they took a lot of the styling elements from the Accord and then they just shrunk it down to work on the Civic. And it seems like Honda and Acura do that. It's like they have the styling on the Acuras, and then they kind of throw that styling down onto the Accord, and then they kind of throw that down onto the Civic, and it's like this top-down effect with styling. So it's like they take the more premium models, and then once they're ready to redo those ones, they kind of throw that styling onto the less premium models. And so it's, yeah, I don't know, I think it's kind of interesting. But yeah, it's definitely more grown up compared to the last Civic. It definitely has a more modern look. It doesn't look as crazy like the last. I mean, everyone knows the last Civic kind of had that kind of like race-ish vibe to it, I guess is the best way to put it, whereas this looks like a kind of, I wouldn't say boring, but it definitely just doesn't look as over stylized, I guess is the best way to put it. But what I've noticed is all of these pictures and everything I've seen in the Civic are all of the sedan. So I wonder what they'll do with the hatchback, or if they'll even release a hatchback. I can't find anything on it. I've tried. If you guys have been able to find anything, let me know in the comment section below so we can kind of clarify it for everyone. But I've only seen stuff on the sedan. But yeah, that's the exterior. And then if I I've looked at quite a few of these interior photos on it, and it actually looks really nice with the interior. The infotainment system's still kind of just like thrown there on the top of the dash, which I really don't care about that kind of stuff. I don't have any complaints about that. I know some people do. But I never had any complaints about the Civic interior to start with. I felt like for the type of car it was, it had a pretty nice interior, but this is even nicer. So it seems like they're kind of starting to, I guess, fight against Mazda. The reason I say Mazda is I actually have a CX-30 this week, and Mazda has a really nice interior from the design perspective and then also materials. And I think that Honda, and then I'm sure that Toyota's going to pick up on this pretty soon as well. They're kind of picking up on that and how people want nice interiors. Like one of the reasons and I know this is completely unrelated car-wise, one of the reasons why I love my Ram TRX is because it has a really nice interior. All of the touch points are leather, nice stitching, where they've done a good job with the stitching. If you know, you know. Carbon fiber, Alcantara, like it's just a nice place to be. And even at these lower price points with like a Honda Civic where it's a commuter type car, people still want something that they get into and it just feels nice. And car manufacturers are picking up on that. And so I think that's why they're kind of spending more money and making the interior nicer. It's just kind of the way that things are going. But yeah, overall, I think it's a good looking car. It looks modern. It kind of also looks like from certain angles, it kind of looks like a Subaru Impreza. I'm not sure if I'll be able to find this image when I'm editing, so I'm just gonna show this to you guys. Like, look at, hopefully the camera will focus. Like that kind of looks like, almost like the Impreza. Modern cars are all starting to look the same, which is kind of sad. But it's kind of the trend. But before we get into the Civic Si and into the Type R, I guess we'll just finish things off for the entry-level Civic that's coming out. Still, it's going to be really affordable. Powertrains are great at getting good gas mileage. They're not going to be particularly crazy fast or enjoyable or anything like that. But we'll have to see once I actually drive the Civic. I feel like from the previous generation to this one, it sounds like they're going to make it, again, more luxurious in every aspect, so it sounds like it's going to drive smoother. With the CVTs, we'll see if they've changed anything from that perspective in terms of the tuning on it to make it shift quicker, smoother, anything like that. I wish they would just do a regular torque converter. I get why manufacturers do CVTs. It's really easy to get good gas mileage with CVTs, but from a driving experience perspective, it's not always the best feeling. But yeah, I'm excited to drive and review one once they come out. They're supposed to be out later this year, which will be awesome. And I think it'll be a really good commuter car. This is, again, before I drive it, here's what I'm guessing is going to happen. I'm probably going to get into it. It's not going to feel that fast, but the interior is going to feel nice. It's going to be a nice place to be. I'm sure the seats will be comfortable. And then I'm sure it'll have this nice, quiet, luxurious driving experience. And it'll just be a great commuter car. Well, this is kind of funny. I was just researching a little bit more before filming this next clip to kind of verify some stuff on the Civic Si and the Type R. And in a couple of these little articles, I found that they are going to be releasing a hatchback, and the hatchback actually might have a manual transmission. And so even though the sedan doesn't have a manual as an option, the hatchback might. And I mean, it kind of makes sense, right? If someone wants the sportier transmission, they're probably also going to want the sportier looking car, which is the hatchback. But aside from that, Honda has pretty much confirmed that they will still have a manual transmission in the Civic Si and the Type R, which completely makes sense, right? That 10-speed automatic they have in the Accord, it's a good transmission, but I would never put that in a Civic Si or a Type R. I mean, it'd be complete sacrilege to have those cars as anything but a manual transmission. And I mean, part of it is the fact that Honda makes one of the best manual transmissions in the car industry. If you guys are wondering, I have a Focus RS right now, and I love the car. It's a great car. But compared to the current generation Civic Type R, it doesn't even hold a candle to it from a transmission perspective. The clutch feel you get with the Civic and the shifter feel and everything is just absolutely amazing. Geez, my hair. Yeah, just everything is just perfect with that whole situation. And so I'm excited to see what they do with the Civic Si and the Type R from a transmission perspective and see what they do to like tune it to make it feel even better. But aside from that revelation with me reading a little bit more information, seriously, I'm like losing hair. I guess I'm going bald, guys. 23, but it's already happening. But aside from that, here's some things that I've kind of heard rumor-wise from people and everything. And just understand this is the complete speculation part of today's video where this isn't confirmed at all. But it sounds like with the Civic Si, they're just going to slightly go up in power, not a massive amount. And I mean, that's pretty typical for most of the Japanese brands, right? They value reliability and so they don't want to push out too much power with the engine. So it sounds like the Civic Si will have a little bit more power. It sounds like it'll still be front wheel drive, which is part of the ethos of the Civic Si. Again, manual transmission. And then obviously it'll be built off of the new platform. The interesting thing to see is if they will let you have a hatchback with it or not. We'll kind of see what happens with that. It'd be really cool to have a Civic Si hatchback. I think that would be a cool car. But aside from all of that, it, again, sounds like more power. They're probably going to tune, from what I've heard, it sounds like they're probably going to tune the brakes and suspension a little bit more to be a little bit sporty. You can get a little bit more out of the car. But it's not going to be, other than the fact that it's on a new platform, it's not going to be a crazy big change from the current generation Si. The biggest changes you'll get is the fact that it's on a different platform. Now the Civic Type R, it sounds like it's going to be a completely different story. So most likely it's going to be built off of the hatchback version of the new Civic. So we'll see what that looks like. I'm really interested to see what that looks like stylistically, seeing what the sedan looks like. But there's a lot of talk of a lot of crazy stuff happening with the Civic Type R, and this could greatly affect the market on the current Civic Type R in more than one way. It could go, or rather, it could affect it one way or the other. So what it sounds like they might do is I've heard from some people that they might pretty much just stick with the same formula, but again, do the same thing they're doing with the Civic Si. So it's going to be built off the new platform, still have a manual transmission. It'll just have a little bit more power, better braking, better tires, better suspension, right? It'll just be kind of like a little bit of an increase, but just on a new platform. That's the first rumor. The second rumor is that they might make it all-wheel drive, which would be awesome, right? That's one of the reasons why I got the Focus RS over the Civic Type R, was because I live in Utah, it snows a ton, and I could make front-wheel drive work, but all-wheel drive is obviously better. And it sounds like the way that they're going to do this is not just throwing all-wheel drive into the car, because the Civic is still built off a front-wheel drive platform. It sounds like they might do some hybrid stuff with it, and this is where I feel like values with the current generation Civic Type R could go all over the place. So it sounds like they might throw in a couple of electric motors or something like that, or maybe just one electric motor to power the rear wheels. We'll see what happens with that. The system they develop, I mean, they have a bunch of stuff from the NSX, so we'll see what they do. But it sounds like they might throw that in so that you have some power going to the rear. So it'll still be like the engine powering the front wheels from what I've heard. And then you'll have electric motors powering the rear wheels. So it'll be all-wheel drive that way. But there's some problems with that, right? That adds complexity, that adds weight. And the Civic Type R is all about being kind of like this just raw sports car that is lightweight. And if you change that, then yeah, it just completely changes the whole ethos of the car. And so then I imagine if they end up going that route, I think that the current generation Civic Type Rs will actually, they'll still, I think they're just going to hold their value regardless, but I think that they might even go up in value because people will want the more raw driving experience that you'll get from the current generation Civic Type R, because it's already proven itself to be a really good car. Now, between these two options, which one do I think is more realistic? I think the first one is more realistic. However, they might have to change some stuff up with the powertrain, because they're pretty much at the upper limit of reliability with having a turbocharged 2-liter 4-cylinder, right? The current generation Civic Type R has over 300 horsepower, which for a little 2-liter engine, I mean, it's pushing it if you want to have that engine be super reliable where you can put a ton of miles on it. And so, yeah, they're definitely at the upper end. So maybe they'll have to develop a different engine. Maybe they'll have to put a little bit of a bigger engine, but then that adds weight. And the Civic Type R is all about not having a lot of weight. So I think that's the route they'll go. I think that it'll just have a more powerful engine, and then everything's going to be more finely tuned. And then again, it's going to be built off of the newer platform, the hatchback version with the Type R, because that's what they did with the last Type R, is the hatchback version. And I'm hoping that's what they do, because the current generation Civic Type R is the best front-wheel drive car ever built. And just as like a sports car in general, even though it's a 4-door hatchback, right, it's one of the most fun cars that you can buy. And if you're able to get one for MSRP, it's such a good value. Like, the amount of fun you can have with that car and the practicality and everything you get is amazing for under $40,000. It's just a really good car. And so I'm thinking they're going to stick with that route, because again, the current Civic Type R has done so well. People absolutely love it. And also, I mean, Honda has been about front-wheel drive, high-performance cars for such a long time. And so them going to all-wheel drive, I mean, I'm not completely against it if they do it right, but I don't think they're going to do it because it's against their ethos. And if you guys wondering what I mean by doing it right, I think that if they just did something like what the Focus RS has, where it has an all-wheel drive system that sends torque to the front or back depending on the drive mode and the situation and all that in different amounts, and it's not a hybrid system, I think that'll be good. But again, that'd still add weight. Like, my Focus RS weighs about 3,400 pounds, whereas the Civic Type R, I think it weighs like 31 or 3,200 pounds. And so when you add all-wheel drive, it adds quite a bit of weight to the car. And the new Civic already weighs more than the previous generation Civic, so you're already having a heavier car, and then on top of that, if you had all-wheel drive, it'd make it even heavier. So then it would kind of go against the ethos of the Civic Type R. So yeah, we'll see what happens, but I think they'll just stick. I think they'll stick with front-wheel drive, more power, better brakes, better tires, better suspension, new interior, new platform, all that kind of stuff. I think that's the route that they're going to end up going. Now let's get some things up for a video going over the new 2022 Honda Civic and then the Type R and the SI as well. If you're stopping for the first time, I really appreciate if you subscribe. I'll see all of you guys in that next video.